Yo, in the AI age, will the real humans please stand up? Stand up.
The first question is maybe just a broad one, really, is how are you guys looking at this?
Sure. Thanks for that, Sufir. So, my point of view is actually relatively simple, although it may seem complicated. It's not really complicated. You cannot take the human out of the loop. The human has to be involved in every step of the process. So if you think about, generating any kind of AI capability or tools or whatever, there are really three parts to it. There is the inputs, there's the processing, and then there's the outputs. And quite frankly speaking, the AI component usually is in the processing part of that workflow that I just described. When you're designing what the set of instructions would be or algorithm would be, whatever language you want to use, you have to be involved in knowing what that's going to be like for anything that you're solving for at the end of the day. But the inputs that go in, especially from a marketing perspective, you want to make sure that you are bringing in consumer feedback or customer inputs that go into that. So you need that piece of information coming in. And then on the output side, when you get the output coming through after you've done the processing work, you still need a human, an expert, to look at that output and say, hey, does this actually make sense? Does this fit with what I'm trying to solve for? What do I need to do to take what the output is and take it through to the finish line? Because we all know that there's no tool available on anything today that will give you 100% of the answer. You as the human have to still be involved in taking it through to the finish line. And I think that's a good thing, especially with the AI world that we're in right now. So that's why I say it's simple. Like, you're involved in every step of the way, if you want to call it that. But very importantly, on the input side, you want consumer or customer inputs coming in, and on the output side, you want the expert being involved. And you're bringing actually 2 or 3 different kinds of expertises at the same time. One is your domain expertise. Second is the expertise of the tool, and third is your knowledge of your customer or your consumer. All those 3 things have to be in, on the human side, has to be evaluating the output that you're getting from an AI tool at the end of the day.
I think for me, Sumer and Yogesh, I think it's an interesting topic. It's also like a reflection of the times that we live in. Like, when I think about data, it's hard for me to think about not human data, right? Like, so what data is, I mean, even without AI, like, what is the data without human? So there is that input piece, right? So data by nature or definition has some touch of human. And I think if you're not having any human, then it's not data. And it's just like a fake sort of like creation of numbers, right? It's not data then at that stage. And so I think for me, the biggest, and Yogesh and I had a chance to actually, or at least I had a chance to listen to Yogesh a few weeks back when he was there presenting in Silicon Valley. I think for me, the struggle is always going to be like, at what stage does this overtake the human in the data, the human data? How do we actually like create guardrails and make sure that it's like supplemental rather than actually like substitute? Which I don't know, Yogesh, you would agree or disagree with that. And then the final thing is like, how do we actually like leverage rather than actually like remove human from the process?
So for me, I am actually excited about AI and what it is bringing to the workforce, to everything. It's definitely, in many ways, much more proficient and productive for organizations to use AI tools instead of humans. I think the fear is that everyone just immediately assumes that the task-oriented job, those people are going to be replaced and they can't find another job. I think there's always going to be a place for humans in the workforce, in every aspect of our life, regardless of how AI tools are used, because everything that AI is based on humans, and at the end of the day, a human has to make the final decision. The example I think is really great. Prior to the internet, there were people who had to do research the old-fashioned way. They had to go to the library, they had to read books. A lot of people had to spend a lot of time and energy doing that. Well, now we
Mhm.
have the internet. All the information is at your fingertips, but you still need a human to sift through all that information because a lot of it is not real. So, no matter what, a human has to be there to make the final decision on what is good and not good and moving forward.
I just wanted to put a little bit of a spanner in what Tamika just said, and just kind of bring to this whole enterprise of GPT, OpenAI, right, where you can simply chat with this tool and it spews out some information. Do you guys believe that the human today, in general, what degree of governance do you think we are putting on in terms of trusting this information and acting on it versus trying to figure out, is this even correct? Where is it coming from? How it is sourced? Is it based on real data? Is it based on synthetic data or not real data? So I guess summarizing what you are saying, the question then is, then are we equipped to be able to validate, verify, check today, and are we doing it?
Yeah. So, look, I think the best way to answer that question, and address some of the previous points that were made is by talking specific use cases, right? Because that's when it kind of like comes to life. Are we talking the same thing or are we talking different things, right? So let's say, for example, I'm trying to figure out, an answer to a question around, is there any information or are there any statistics available about a particular topic? Let's say, for example, AI adoption. What is the degree of AI adoption among companies today? If I was to prompt that into ChatGPT or something, will it give me a real answer or is it going to be a made up answer, right? That's the question, right? You can prompt it, you'll get an answer back. How will you go verify it? That's the first question. What is going to be your verification process? Are you going to actually prompt ChatGPT with a follow-up question and say, where did you source it from? And it gives you a list of articles or whatever. Are you able to go into those articles and actually find that source information or not? I've done that, back in 2023. Okay, it's 2 years now, so things have changed obviously since then. But back in 2023, I found that it wasn't doing a great job. It would give you the references, but when you looked for the actual, quote, or if you looked for the actual statistic, it wasn't doing a very good job at all, right? So I don't trust any of these large language models to pull information and give it to me from sources or information, because I have to still spend time to go through the verification process. So I've changed my behavior in a different way, where I actually upload documents into ChatGPT, which I've already looked at to a certain degree. I know that there's information in there. I then ask ChatGPT to go in and extract information from there. And then I ask it, tell me what page you found that information from. And I can go and check because I have the document in my hand already, right? So by flipping that approach, I have, improved my ability to verify information because I'm the one controlling what information is actually that's being used in my conversation with ChatGPT in that example. But that's just one use case that that came to the top of my head as we were having this conversation right now. Maybe there are other ways too. I don't know. Maybe you guys are doing something different.
How does
Yeah,
that work? Nikki? Sorry, go ahead, Tamika.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Yogesh a follow-up. Yogesh, how does it work when you don't have a document to upload?
Yeah.
When you
So
don't have information to validate?
yeah. So in those situations, what I'm doing is I ask it to tell me which sources it extracted information from. Claude does a better job. Perplexity does a better job than ChatGPT does. There are differences by platform in terms of their ability to go and verify, right? So once it's identified those sources, then I actually go into Google and search for those actual sources, right? So if I'm looking for a specific quote, what I found, by and large, it usually paraphrases. It doesn't give me the exact quote, right? If it's pulling for a number, it's a bit hit or miss. I haven't done it in about 6 months, so I don't know if the quality has improved or not. This is a fast-moving space, of course, but the few times I did try it, I wasn't convinced that I was getting good answers. So that's why I don't go down that path as frequently anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, listening to Yogesh and his example, this is one of the reasons why I strongly believe there should be some certain level of governance with some of the data that is there, in particular with social media. The one thing that is concerning that I think a lot of people don't consider is currently right now, the stuff that's in ChatGPT, the stuff that you see out there is based on stuff that's already in existence, whether it's true or false. And they don't know the difference. The machine just has information. So ideally, I would love for there to be some governance. Now, I know some people would argue that this is an infringement on free speech, that, it should be put out there for everyone to read. I do think that somehow we should have some sort of balance. Something that we clearly know is false should not be posted online over and over again.
Victor, don't you think that the providers of these models, like over a period of time, the system should actually like sort itself out? So my argument is that if the information that you get from some of these models or these sources continues to be unreliable, then nobody's going to use them, right? And so they're going to fall out of favor. And the reverse is also true. If they're consistently better, then the wisdom of the crowds would sort of like overcome, and you'll actually end up like gravitating towards them. So my sense is that I think every time you try to regulate something, it becomes even harder, because on what basis are you forming those regulations, right? I mean, what is the truth, right? Like it's like hard to debate.
Yeah. But if you see how on social media, people can't differentiate between what is bad and what is good. I mean, I think that's what the problem is. A lot of people just don't know whether it's good or bad. They just see what is on there and they just assume, oh, ChatGPT gives me this, then it must be right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's going to get bad because, especially right now, we're just talking about text, but, and we tend to trust video more than we tend to trust text. But now with the advent of Sora 2 that just released in the last couple of weeks, the quality of output from Sora 2 is absolutely mind-blowing. And now we're going to be questioning ourselves as to what we're seeing with our eyes. Is it actually real or not? It's opening up a huge can of worms.
Essentially, this is how the market economy works. The economy, it corrects itself. It rewards good behavior. It punishes bad, decisions or bad content, bad product that is out there. But when there is no information to the contrary, right? So we are all researchers, right? We all come from research. We look for evidence. We try to create, okay, when we use this data, the insight, we take certain decisions. Does it give us the right results or not? So do you think that, the question that I wanted to ask put to you was, have we come to a point yet, or have you seen examples where, this bad data, which I think we all agree that there's a lot of bad data, even today, there's a lot of bad information coming out. People are making decisions, when I say decisions, I mean in the corporate environment, in the insights research world. Are you seeing evidence anywhere or documented evidence where we are seeing there's a difference now in outcomes, in results, as a result of relying on these systems? Or this is still too early in your view?
I think it's going to be a hard question to answer just yet, because if you think about the journey everyone's on, I would say 2023 and most of 2024 was trying to figure out what the hell is all this stuff. And let's run some experiments on what's happening. 2025 is really the year when companies are starting to share either outcomes of their experiments or what they're actually now implementing in their organizations. So I think it's the answer to the question will become more transparent, most likely in 2026 or 2027, in my opinion, because then you're going to start seeing in-market results to compare back to what was generated by AI as part of their workflow process. And that's when we will actually know what's truly worked or not. Now, are there instances of AI for bad? Of course there are. And there are lots of them, quite frankly speaking. You just have to go on to TikTok or on, or Sora or something like that, and you'll see all the videos that are being generated right now. Oh my God, you don't know what's true anymore. I created a video of me playing the role of James Bond walking into a casino, all in a tuxedo. Did this literally last night. If you see the video, you're like, that's Yogesh, but that he's playing Bond, but it's how could that be kind of thing, right? Technology allows you to do that kind of stuff right now. So
if you have young kids in school or something, right? Like like how AI is being positioned as like a bad thing to do, right? Like, hey, don't use AI because if we use AI, we're going to get you an F grade, right? Like we'll fail you immediately if you know that you used it.
and yet we're telling kids, oh, you need to know AI to be to get a job.
Exactly.
Mixed messaging.
It's very mixed messaging. It's also like, it's left like, I mean, it's the same scenario for us as researchers or as professionals, where we're like, okay, am I going to be doomed if I use it? And am I going to be doomed if I don't use it? And so finding that balance is going to be like, which is the point I was making, Yogesh, is like, we are like young kids in school, right? Like where we're seeing this technology come through, but we really don't know what to do with it. Should I use it? Should I not use it?
But you know what? In like corporate America, like one of the things that is becoming a major problem is the interview process. There are a lot of fake resumes, fake applicants, and companies are really struggling now. Before, when they applied for a job, we used to have 50 applicants, maybe 75. Now they have 3,000. And then if they get through the first phase and they're interviewing, there's this AI generated. These AI systems are getting better, and so it's really interesting where a lot of organizations with ill intent are trying to have access to companies, systems and stuff by applying for these jobs. I see that as like really a major concern for security, and it just makes people who are looking for jobs, their just lives so much harder. The work and finding a job so much harder because they have to not only just separate themselves out from the pack in order to get the interview, but also have to combat these fake applicants out there that may be seemingly perfect because it's been perfectly curated using AI.
I think a lot of this it's funny because, AI is meant to like take us forward technologically in our thinking, drive efficiency and productivity. But I think, Tomika, to your example, like a lot of this is forcing people to go back to their old methods, right? Like relationships, network, like pinging people one-on-one. Like it goes back to this point that we started with, like the human piece, right? Now the human is getting back into the action, whereas initially used to be 50, the system used to take care of itself. I do think that every time you introduce new technology or new systems or new processes, people will try and game it. People will try and abuse it. But then the system catches up, right? The system always like sorts itself out. And if it doesn't, then the technology basically falls out of favor. If it gets more abusive, then people are not going to use it, right? If people find it like unreliable. So I think there is like vested interest in everybody's interest to actually like make this successful if they really truly believe this is going to be game changing.
There are two examples I can share to your point, Tomika. One was actually with Amazon. I don't know if you remember this from a few years ago, where Amazon was using an AI system to screen candidates for roles, and they found that it was screening out good quality candidates, but the people who were being selected were typically male, right? And they were reflective of certain ethnic groups, South Asians, and so on and so forth. Why? Because their training set that they'd used was based on that profile, right? So if there was a female coming in, who was African American or white, they were automatically screened out because the algorithm was structured based on the training set, basically. So they had to basically they had to discard that whole system a few years ago because it was giving them, quote unquote, bad output, which is the case. Second example that happened actually with Wells Fargo in the home refinancing space, where they were using AI tools to screen people for whether they should get refinancing or not. It was screening against African Americans. And when people figured that out, there was a class action lawsuit. Wells Fargo paid a lot of money as a consequence of that. So when we talk about AI, then the predictive capabilities, the training data becomes so important in that process, and not knowing what's going in, that's the role. Insights people should be all over that in terms of saying, is this representative of what's happening in the marketplace? Is the training set being used correctly or not? These questions, I don't know if people are even asking, quite frankly speaking, because to the earlier point that was made around good quality data, even our survey data has problems today with fraud and things like that. So that's not really the benchmark, quite frankly speaking.
But one of the things that I find interesting is that instead of adapting the technology, their attitude is, oh, we're just going to throw it away. There are now states that actually will say, you cannot use AI tools for hiring. You cannot use AI tools to set compensation. And certain rules like that in certain states. It is interesting to me, back to the human. This almost like, well, we don't trust the AI system at all, so we're going to be human no matter what. This is how we're going to do it. So it's just really interesting that the limitations that AI tools have, because it has become to the point where it's so not trustful that people have just totally abandoned it in making some of these business decisions that they're making.
And that's why I don't fear the replacement of humans in the process for exactly what you said, right? Because there are limitations. You have to have the human in the loop, at the input phase, like I was mentioning, and then the output phase, which was what you mentioned just now, right? So we can't get away from that, quite frankly speaking. So
Humans also have biases, right? We all have our own, upbringing. We bring our own preconceived notions into the whole ecosystem as well, and that has always been an issue and limitation as well. So I guess let's, from a forward-looking perspective, right? So let me put some statements, problem statements that you guys have mentioned, and then let's kind of try to, as we come to an end, from your perspective, what could make it work, right? That how do we preserve this human, and how do we keep this technology and innovation? Because it is useful. It is useful. Obviously, we all acknowledge that, and it is going to keep on, becoming more and more integral to our work. So, if you can kind of summarize from your perspectives, what is the ideal state? Like, what should be, how it should work to make it work right in the right way, right? What should change, going forward?
For me, AI tools is as good as their data. So you got to have really, really good data to move forward. If you don't have good data, what can you do to make it better? If you can't make it better, then you need to reevaluate whether that tool is even useful. I think it really starts at the foundation of, garbage in, garbage out. Do you want that scenario, or do you want something good? So you really need to start with having really good, complete data.
I think for me, the summary is mostly about I'm excited about the technology, about the opportunity that it creates, and the changes that it will introduce. But it is a journey that humans have to take together. I think to Tamika's point, it's about inputs and outputs, or Yogesh's point as well. So I feel like humans will be involved in the loop. Whether we over-index in some places or under-index in some places, that will depend on the maturity of the technology and the reliability. But I also believe that the system sorts itself out and will find an equilibrium pretty soon.
Yeah, I would say that, on that system piece, right, it's not, the data quality is paramount, no question. But even the algorithm itself can lend itself to biases as well, right, based on how it's been designed. So there has to be a protocol in place, or protocols in place for people to evaluate the output and see if that's actually, is it being driven because of the source data, or is it being driven because of the algorithm itself? And there has to be, feedback loops to ensure that the algorithm also is being adaptive as the marketplace changes, or as the profiling of the data changes over time, so to speak, right? So to me, we can't ignore that part of it either, basically.
Any last comments on the data piece itself and what should be done?
Well, we didn't get into synthetic data, but what I would say is that that's a complement to your human generated data, so to speak. Just to kind of like level set, some people associate that as being fraudulent data. That is not fraudulent data. It's based on actual, parameters and algorithms that determine the generation of that data. And it can actually help create new tools and capabilities that we currently don't have in our toolkit. I try to advocate that let's not try to see synthetic data as a replacement to existing methodologies and tools and data sets, but it's an augmentation of our existing data sets. And then that's when you can start actually imagining what the new capabilities would be. And I'll give you a very specific example that's real right now, I think, for a lot of companies. With the announcement from OpenAI that you can now start making purchases through ChatGPT.
Walmart, yeah.
Right? And Walmart's being part of that as well, as you said just now. Tell me what data, human data, is going to be available to tell us how to think about that. There'll be zero data because it doesn't exist, right? But you could generate synthetic data to help you simulate what would be the likelihood, possibilities, and so on and so forth, to help you simulate what could happen. So, we've grown up in a world of inference using consumer data, right? But we haven't grown up in a world of simulate with data. That's a different skill set. And that's what synthetic data can offer us in terms of simulation, not necessarily inference.
But I mean, Yogesh, it's a very slippery slope. It's like, who is inferring, what is getting inferred, what are the guardrails around it, right?
Hold on.
Where does it supplement, not supplement? Where does it substitute, not substitute? I mean, what I'm saying is, I'm excited about the journey, but there's so much work to be done in that area.
But you said exactly what I was not saying. I'm not saying to replace and to use synthetic data for inference. I'm not saying that. I'm saying use it for simulation, not for inference, right? So the issue that you raised is actually a non-issue because you're not using it for inference in the first place.
Who stops you from doing that, Yogesh, right? It's a self-discipline, right? Like, there isn't any, see, what would happen is that eventually when this goes out in the ether, right, there would be people who would be non-researchers, people who are non-ethical users of data, who would also, like, they're not going to have the same, like, discrimination of, like, I'm going to use it for this use case and I'm not going to use it for this use case. They're just going to use it.
I agree with that. You're right? But this is where, as an industry, we don't have common nomenclature around what's considered synthetic, what's considered human, what is the blending that happens around that, and language around that. And then you were the first one to say, what are the guardrails? I agree with you. There are guardrails that are needed in this case, right? And quite frankly, it's incumbent on both sides, the vendor as well as on the client side, to make sure that there is clarity and transparency around this stuff. The client should be demanding it from the vendors, and the vendor should be providing it, right? And if they're not, right, then shame on the client for not asking.
So this is a good point for us to, I guess, break. And I don't think this was enough time for sure for this topic. I think it's a huge topic. I may call upon you guys for a follow-up conversation at some point. So I'll really appreciate if you can, if you be able to make yourselves available, then that would be great.
Thanks, Sumer, for organizing this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
AI is talking, but who's thinking?